I forget the number. There are going to be timestamps down below because there's a lot of information included in this video, and feel free to jump around and look at the tips that help you. Okay, so you guys asked for this one a lot, and I've seen all the comments. I didn't make this video earlier because I wanted to make sure the advice and tips were substantial, relevant, and actionable, so I've actually spent quite a bit of time thinking about the tips I wanted to include, and I believe this is a good set of things to keep in mind and things to do to improve your ability to plan your first pair or even pass that in inspection. Planning your first pair in inspection is a little bit different than planning an X-Cross, so that won't be covered in this video. I might go over that in another video. So I have 8 things I've compiled into a list, and the first 2 are more general things to keep in mind when practicing and trying to improve solves in general, and more specifically so for planning first pair in inspection, and the last 6 are actionable items that you can take right now and start integrating into your solves. So tip 1 is just a general mindset to keep in mind, is that it's going to take time. I think people get frustrated a lot. They'll try and say, oh, I've learned all these tips, and then they'll do 1 solve, see no improvement, do 5 solves, see no improvement, and then get frustrated and give up on trying. But cubing obviously is a gradual improvement. It's going to take time before you start seeing results. In fact, you might actually get slower while trying to do more advanced things. Like when people learn F12, it usually slows them down a little bit, and then once they integrate it into their solves, integrate it into their muscle memory, it makes them much, much faster and much, much more efficient. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. It's going to take time, and don't worry if it makes you a little bit slower at first. Tip 2, kind of going off of this one, is that when you practice, don't practice for too long, because especially for me, I tend to lose concentration after like half an hour of cubing, at which point I'll get frustrated and just revert to old habits. For example, when I was transitioning to color neutral, after about 100 solves or so, I would lose concentration and then revert back to white yellow because it was what was easiest, even though I should have actively been looking for other colors. So when you're practicing, don't do more solves than any time it takes for you to get like bored and almost mindlessly doing your solves, because at that point you're not actively practicing new things and you're not going to get faster. Of course, practice does have its place in terms of integrating what you've learned into your solves, but if you're not actively thinking about the things you need to integrate into your solves, it's almost counterproductive. So those are more 2 tips to keep in mind. Now on to 6 things that you can start doing now integrating into your solves. Tip 3 is to take longer than 15 seconds to inspect. This kind of goes off the first tip where you should be keeping in mind that it's going to take time to improve. So especially if you're not comfortable planning your first pair inspection, you can't do it in under 15 seconds. So by taking longer than 15 seconds to inspect, you're allowing your brain longer to process and think, especially now since unfortunately competitions aren't happening. You don't need to worry about like if the next week there's a competition, you got to practice with 15 seconds of inspection. In fact, whenever I practice at home, I have inspection turned off so I can think about the fastest way to go about a solve, and maybe like a week or so or a day before competition, I'll practice with inspection just to get into sort of the mood of a competition. So yeah, recap for tip 3, take longer than 15 seconds to inspect to allow your brain time to comprehend the cube, understand, and try and track and predict where pieces are going to go. Building off of tip 3, tip 4. Do untimed solves and try doing solves with slow turning, but there's a little bit of a caveat. So first, for untimed solves, what it allows you to do is instead of worrying about not pausing, turning as fast as you can, and doing the next thing, untimed solves allow you to do something, pause and think about what you did or think about what you're going to do in this regard, because when you do solves super quickly, you don't really tend to reflect upon what you've done. In fact, when I do solves sometime and I get a really good solve, I'll be like, what cross color did I just do? It's sort of almost mindless, instantaneous thinking. So what untimed solves allow you to do are, if you do something for a cross, think about it. Did the pieces end up where you thought they were going to be? Did you execute it smoothly? And different things like that. And for the second part of this tip, you should integrate slow turning in your solve. But again, I said there's one caveat. Slow turning doesn't mean slow look ahead. Slow turning allows you to look ahead better, sort of reduce your pauses, I guess, so that ultimately is the goal. Slow turning here allows you to look ahead and predict better where pieces are going to go. And then as you start doing solves and doing the same algs over and over and understanding where pieces are going to go, you can increase your turning speed back to what it normally is. So this slow turning, it's again not to reduce pauses, though that ultimately is the goal. It's to help you understand where pieces go when you execute the algorithms that you already know. Tip 5, now that I remember the order of the numbers, try to visualize where pieces are going to end up and try to plan your first pair alg. This, I have a second tip if this doesn't work for you. Basically, a smooth cross to +1 transition doesn't involve quickly finding your F12 pair while doing the cross. It involves knowing where your first pair is going to end up before you've started to execute your cross. And this goes back to a couple other tips before, especially at the beginning. This is going to be super, super difficult. So turn off inspection, take more than 15 seconds to try and visualize where pieces are going to go. And if you've gotten to the step where you can figure out where the pieces are going to go, try and plan your first pair algorithm in inspection, or be like, if the pair is going to end up in the back here, I can do this type of insert or this type of rotation to insert it. So try to visualize where pieces are going to go and take time during inspection to do this. So take more than 15 seconds, try and figure out out where pieces are going to go. And as you start doing this more and more, you'll start understanding how different moves affect the pieces and where the pieces will end up after your cross. Tip 6, to build off of tip 5, if you can't predict where the pieces are going to go, that's completely fine, because especially at the beginning, it's really difficult when you're doing a lot of different moves, because cross can integrate a lot of different moves into their solutions. Try to figure out one pair that you want to track during cross. So this is going to be different. So you don't know where it's going to end up, but you know where the pieces are before you start executing the cross. So if you can't figure out where they're going to end up, try tracking a corner and an edge, and maybe integrating, like I said earlier, slower turning and seeing how they move around the cube as you solve your cross. This doesn't necessarily imply slower turning, but slower turning here will allow you to track the pieces and understand how the pieces move when you solve your cross. So again, just to reiterate, if you can't predict where the pieces are going, that's totally fine. First, try and find a corner and edge in inspection that you're going to track while you execute your cross. And then once you get better and better at that, then you can start predicting where the pieces are going to end up and start predicting the algorithm you're going to need to insert the first edge. So now for the last 2 tips, this is going to be tip 7, is to watch breakdowns and tips from a lot of top cubers. I used to not do this in the past. I don't know, maybe I was stubborn or something, but this is definitely something that has helped improve in my solves, especially since the world of algs and stuff is not limited, but there's a lot of intuitive stuff that isn't really explained in like PDFs and algorithms and stuff that some of these breakdowns and tips can really help with. For example, right now I'm watching a lot of Jay's F12 videos and a lot of his walkthrough solves, and they're super interesting, and I've noticed things that I've started integrating into my solves, which is really good. And in general, to become fast like top cubers, you want to see how they're thinking, how they're solving, how they're practicing, how they're thinking out their cross and +1 and things like that. So last tip number 8. I have this really cool resource. It's a cross +1 practice website, and this really allows you to get into sort of levels almost of planning your cross +1, because part of the difficulty of planning cross +1 in regular solves is that the cross can take anywhere up to 8 moves, and if you're just starting to try and plan cross +1, an 8-move cross is not going to be very helpful for you. So what this website allows you to do is it allows you to pick the type of scramble you get, which in this sense means how many moves is it going to take to solve the cross. So at the very beginning, you want to pick scrambles that have 1 move to solve the cross. And then as you start doing this, hopefully I'll have some videos and clips and stuff. But what this allows you to do is it gives you a really easy cross so that you can see where the other pieces will end up and track them and predict the algorithm that you're going to need to solve them. And once you feel comfortable doing 1-move crosses, start doing 2-move crosses and predicting first pair, first 2 pairs, whatever. And then once you're comfortable with that, start doing 3-move, 4-move, 5-move, up to 8 moves. And then once you're up to 8 moves, since 8 moves is the optimal cross solution, you can start practicing these into your solves. So basically what this allows you to do is take discrete steps of difficulty in planning cross +1, and it allows you to start super easy. In fact, I've actually been using this a lot starting at the lower levels because it allows me to get a better grasp of how the pieces are moving and get better at tracking 2 pairs in inspection and etc. and things like that, or planning X cross and stuff like that. So this website is useful, especially if you're feeling frustrated, like where to start when you're looking at solves and you see absolutely nothing. If it's even hard to figure out the cross, how are you going to plan your first pair, right? So this website allows you to give easy cross scrambles so that you can track first pair and then gradually increase the difficulty of the cross as your ability to plan first pair increases in inspection. So yeah, those are 8 tips I have for how to plan cross +1, which is definitely a really big thing that a lot of cubers, including myself, sometimes struggle with. So hopefully you can take some of these things into account and start integrating them and practicing them into your solves and get better at the cross to F12 transition. Again, hope you found some of this useful, and I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like me on Facebook, follow me on Instagram, and subscribe for the latest content.